Well, good morning. If everybody can just figure out where they're going to be, that would be great. Thank you for joining us this morning, and thank you and welcome to everybody that's joining us online. We're glad you're here. Please feel free to connect with us through the chat. Love to know that you were joining us this morning. If this is your first time here, welcome. If you go through Facebook or our website, there's a little link where you can give us some more information about you and your family. We would love to get to know you and help you connect here and be part of our community, and we look forward to getting to know you. Dave is going to finish our sermon series on conversations with Jesus today. But just as a note, we are not saying that that's the end of conversations with Jesus. We actually totally encourage that everybody continues conversing with Jesus. We think that's a great thing. Just a couple of announcements. One, Love the City. We were overwhelmed last year with the response for buying shoes for elementary-aged kids. We bought 50 pairs last year, and that went a long way at the schools. And we would just like to encourage you again, you can do that now. If you wanted to buy some shoes for elementary-aged kids, you can drop them off at the office, I believe, until September 20th. And we'd love to have that happen. We have tried to make some good inroads with several of the schools in the area, and that's something you continue to pray for, that those could be effective ways to impact our community, as they have been so far. Tonight is our Sunday prayer gathering. So tonight at 6 o'clock, please come back, bring your mask, and join us for a chance to get back to, there are a lot of things we can be praying about, a lot of things, and we'd love to see you here at 6 o'clock to do that. Volunteers, we need more volunteers. People that have volunteered before, we would love to have your help again. People that have never volunteered, we'd love to have you start to use your gifts here in this community and serve the people here. If you're brand new even, could be your first week here, talk to the office, phone the office, and see how you might get involved. We'd love to have you. It's also a lot more rewarding when you're involved, so we certainly encourage you to do that. And lastly, if you'd like to buy an Emmanuel mask, we have ones like this. These are for volunteers, but they're just like this. You see some of the people wearing them, but the ones that are for sale are gray. And if you'd like to buy them, they're $10, and you can see Amanda Henderson. She'll probably be at the desk after the service. And so if you'd like to just turn your attention to the screen, we're going to start our service this morning.
And by screen, he means for those online and for those in here up to the stage. I'm going to invite you to stand with me. We're going to do a reading together from Psalm 77. So this is going to be a responsive reading. The words are on the screen there. I will read the first verse, and then the bolded parts we'll read together as a congregation. I cry aloud to God, and he will hear me. In the day of my trouble I seek the Lord. In the night my hand is stretched out without wearying. My soul refuses to be comforted. When I remember God, I moan. When I meditate, my spirit faints. You hold my eyelids open. I am so troubled that I cannot speak. I consider the days of old, the years long ago. I said, let me remember my song in the night. Let me meditate in my heart. Then my spirit made a diligent search. Will the Lord spurn forever and never again be favorable? Has his steadfast love forever ceased? Are his promises at an end for all time? Has God forgotten to be gracious? Has he in anger shut up his compassion? Then I said, I will appeal to this, to the years of the right hand of the Most High. I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your wonders of old. I will ponder your work and meditate on your mighty deeds. Your ways, O God, is holy. What God is great like our God? You are the God who works wonders. You have made known the might among the peoples. You, with your arm, redeemed your people, the children of Jacob and Joseph. When the waters saw you, O God, when the waters saw you, they were afraid. Indeed, the deep trembled. The clouds poured out water. The skies gave forth thunder. Your arrows flashed on every side. The crash of your thunder was in the whirlwind. Your lightnings lighted up the world. The earth trembled and shook. Your way was through the sea, your path through the great waters, yet your footprints were unseen. You led your people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron. Today, Pastor Dave is going to be speaking on doubt, and obviously we're in times where many of us are feeling doubts in our lives, maybe in our faith and our circumstances, and in the psalm we're calling to remembrance the things of old that God has done, and calling to remembrance who he is. And so let's just bow before him as we enter into worship together this morning. Father, we are honored to come before you this morning. And we come to you as the God who only does wonders. You are amazing, and when we consider what you have done, it gives us confidence to look forward and knowing that we are within your hand and your sovereign plan. And even in times of uncertainty and doubt, God, we know that you are unchanging, that you are in control, and you are the mighty God who saves and redeems and who is bringing order to chaos, even when we don't fully see and understand. We thank you that we can trust you and come to you this morning pleading with you, God, that you would be delighted by our worship. And even right now, as these songs are played, Lord, would you draw us into your presence, Lord? Would you give us hearts that are longing to praise and honor you? We entrust this time to you, praying that you would speak to us. We love you, Lord, and thank you so much that we can be gathered together this morning. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. You may be seated.
Let's sing When You Move. When you move, darkness runs for cover. When you move, no one's turned away. Where you are, fear turns into praises. And where you are, no heart's left unchanged. See, so come, move, let justice roll on like a river. Let worship turn into revival. Lord, lead us back to you. When you move, the outcast finds a family. When you move, the orphan finds a home. Lord, here we are. Teach us to love mercy with humble hearts. We bow down at your throne. See, so come move. So come move. Let justice roll on like a river. Let worship turn into revival. Lord, lead us back to you. So come, move, let justice roll on like a river. justice roll on like a river. Let worship turn into revival. Lord, lead us back to you.
Just before Dave comes, let's just take a bit of time to pray to God. God, we thank you that you are an anchor for us during what has been happening this year. There's been so much going on, so many changes, so many things lost and canceled. But God, you haven't canceled anything. You've canceled the punishment for our sin, which we didn't deserve and still don't. And yet you did that for us. We thank you, God, for the position that you have allowed us to have, that you've brought us into. God, we have many people we need to pray for today in our community and outside of that. We think of Dan, who's at home, and we thank you that he had a surgery. It went well. Then there was a complication. Then he had another surgery, and thankfully it went well also. So now he's at home resting, God. I pray that you would continue to heal him as only you can. We are excited to hear about the next steps for him, but we thank you that you're guiding that situation. And it could be so dire, but we trust you with it. God, we thank you that you're guiding it this far, and we know that you'll guide it completely. And we look forward to how that's going to go. God, we also pray for people who have lost things around us. There has been a lot of that. God, I pray for us that you could use us in the situations we find ourselves, whether it be at work or now with people about to head back to school. The kids are going to go back, and it looks very different. But God, I pray that you could use us to be an encouragement to those who need it, and there are a lot of those. There are people sitting here. There are people sometimes I'm looking at in the mirror that could use some encouragement. And I pray, God, that you could use us to do that, to provide your encouragement to others. I pray that we could be a voice of calm when people are needing that. I pray, God, that we could be generous if there's people around us that are needing financial support or other types of support, that we could try our best to provide it where we can. God, I thank you for the way we have been able to impact some people through our relationships at schools around us. I pray that would continue. Thank you that we can buy shoes for kids, just as a way to show our love for the community, to people that need it, God. And I know there's a lot of need. As we talked with people who are working in the communities, this year has caused needs that are overwhelming on many levels. And I pray that we could in some small way be used to meet some of those, a few of those, and do it in your name, God. Encourage people in your name so that they'd know who you are and that you're there and that you care about them regardless of their situation. So go with us, God. Go with us this week. I pray now as Dave comes that you could use your word to encourage each of us, to give us a bit of attention and focus, and that we could look for ways to be used of you, to step into conversations, to step into situations in a godly way, in a positive way, and that we could see your name be praised because of it. We just pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Matthew 11, 1-19. After Jesus had finished instructing his 12 disciples, he went on from there to teach and preach in the towns of Galilee. When John, who was in prison, heard about the deeds of the Messiah, he sent his disciples to ask him, "Are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else?" Jesus replied, "Go back and report to John what you hear and see. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, and the deaf hear. The dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor. Blessed is anyone who does not stumble on account of me." As John's disciples were leaving, Jesus began to speak to the crowd about John. "What did you go into the wilderness to see? A reed swayed by the wind? If not, what did you go out to see? A man dressed in fine clothes? No, those who wear fine clothes are in kings' palaces. Then what did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes, I tell you, and more than a prophet. This is the one about whom it is written,
'I'll send my messenger ahead of you, who will prepare your way before you.'
I tell you the truth, among those born in women, there has not risen anyone greater than John the Baptist. Yet he who is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. From the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven has been forcefully advancing, and forceful men lay hold of it. For all the prophets in the law prophesied until John. And if you are willing to accept it, he is the Elijah who has to come. And he who has ears, let him hear. To what can I compare this generation? They are like children sitting in the marketplace and calling out to others.
'We played the flute for you, and you did not dance. We sang a dirge, and you did not mourn.'
For John came neither eating nor drinking, And they say, He has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking. And they say, Here is a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. But wisdom is proved right by her actions.
Well, first of all, good morning, church family. It is good to again be with you. And the Muda family, we have Jill here and Ben and Carter, buddy. You rocked it up there. Thank you so much for reading that. Your parents didn't memorize, but it seemed like you memorized. You got a one up on them. So good job, buddy. Good job up there. And for those of you online, so good to have you with us watching online. Again, before I get into opening up God's Word this morning, I just wanted to say, for those of you here in the auditorium, thank you so much for being here, being a part of our live Sunday gathering. It has been such an encouragement, not just to me, but for everyone. I've heard this over and over again. Just been an encouragement to be able to come together, to worship together, to be together. And for those of you online, we had 96, or actually 100, around 100 last week. We have over 100. We have the balcony. To those in the balcony this morning, thanks for coming in the balcony and sitting up there. And for all of the kids, just in case you are wondering, there is these little booklets that we have up. So if you didn't get one of these, we could love to give you one. You can just go find anyone with a blue annual mask, and they will get you one. And Glenn, I think you have some crayons up there, so you can't use that. Your son's got to use that up there. So, but it is good to be with you. And just some exciting news. Kev prayed for it, but we've been praying for Dan Wadsworth. His cancer. We've been praying for him. He went in for surgery Monday. The Lord graciously allowed him to get through that. He went in for another emergency surgery, and God graciously looked after him and got him through that. So, Dan, I know you're watching this morning. We are praying for you, and you are a testimony to us. Your perseverance and just how you're allowing God to use you through this has just been an encouragement for all of us as a church family. Well, we, like Kev said, we've been in a series that we've called Conversations with Jesus, and what we've been doing is looking at the various conversations that Jesus has had with the various people that he has encountered in hopes of, as we look at those conversations, we can get some valuable information and learn some valuable lessons. And so this morning, we've come to the last conversation, and this morning we've come to a man who has struggled with doubt. So let me ask you, as we just start this morning, have you ever doubted? Have you ever struggled? Have you ever been there yourself and struggled with doubt? Have you ever doubted the world in which we live in? I mean, the world in which we live in right now is radically different than the past few years or months. Have you ever doubted someone's words that they spoke to you? Someone's actions that they gave and did to you, or even someone's intentions? What about God? Let's just go there for a moment. What about God? Have you ever doubted God? Have you ever doubted his goodness to you? Have you ever doubted his timing in your life? Have you ever doubted his plan for you? Why is this happening at this moment in your life? What about Jesus? Have you ever doubted Jesus? You ever, doubted what he said or what he taught? I mean, he taught some pretty hard things. What about his death and his resurrection? Is that really real? What about the good news of the gospel? What he taught about the good news of the gospel? I mean, does he really love you like he claimed he does? Does he really offer the forgiveness like he says he does? Can he really accept you like the Bible tells us? What about the Bible? Speaking of the Bible, what about the Bible? You ever wondered, did Jonah really get swallowed by a fish? Come on. Or what about Balaam's donkey? Did it really speak in human words? What about theological questions? Have you ever doubted that? Have you ever doubted and said, can there really be a good God if there's so much suffering in this world? Or what about this question, how can a loving God allow people to go to hell? That may create some spiritual doubt in you. Or what about just some practical Christian questions like, I thought if I became a Christian, things would change in my life. Things would be better, but I'm looking at my life right now and it hasn't changed and things aren't looking all that good. Have you ever doubted? Have you ever doubted in your life? Have you ever doubted in your spiritual walk? Have you ever been there? And let me just tell you this morning that if you find yourself there this morning, or if you can remember a moment in your life where you have doubted, let me just say you're not alone. You're in good company. In fact, if you were to look through the pages of the Bible, if you were to read through the Bible, you would see many people in the Bible doubted. Let me just give you 3 people in the Bible that doubted. Abraham. Abraham was told by God that he would become a great nation. However, he looked at his family, which was really just him and his wife, and said, how am I going to be a great nation when I can't even have kids when my wife is infertile? He doubted God. Or what about Elijah when he heard the news that Jezebel had given orders to kill all of God's prophets? And so Elijah runs for his life. He goes into the desert and he falls underneath a tree and he begins to doubt God. We see the great Elijah doubting God's plan and what he was up to. Or how about the greatest one, or what we sometimes think is the greatest one, the celebrity of all doubters? You know who I'm talking about? Thomas. The one who, said these words, unless I see the nail mark scars in his hand and put my finger where their nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. Thomas had a tough time believing that Jesus really rose from the dead. And so we see people doubting all the way through the Bible. In fact, listen to these words that Charles Spurgeon, a great English preacher, said. He said these words, some of us who have preached the word for years and have been the means of working faith in others and of establishing them in the knowledge of the fundamental doctrines of the Bible have nonetheless been the subjects of the most fearful and violent doubts as to the truth of the very gospel that we preached. Pastors aren't even exempt from these sorts of doubts. Doubts are real, and it can either come and creep into our lives, or it can come like a rushing wind. And so this morning, what I want to do is I want to take us to a man, not Thomas, but what I want to do is take us to a man who was, by Jesus' own admission and his own words, the greatest prophet that ever lived. In fact, this man had done some great things for the Lord. This man was known for pointing people to Jesus. This man had a tremendous impact and a secure faith in Jesus, and yet this great prophet, this great man, we see in this text, which we're going to look at, and in this conversation, wavered and wrestled in his faith. So the question that I want to look at before we look into this conversation, is what do we do? What do we do? What do we do when the doubts come into our life? Where do we go? Where do we turn? How do we handle those doubts when they come either creeping in or crashing into our life? And here's the first thing I want you to know before we get into this conversation. I want you to know that doubt is not necessarily a bad thing. We typically think that doubt is a negative thing, that doubt is a bad thing. However, doubt is a natural thing and can actually be used to strengthen our faith. You see, there's 2 destinations when doubt comes into our life. The doubt can either cause us to go down and wrestle and become insecure, or it can bring us up and point us to God and anchor ourselves there and trust in Him more. There's 2 destinations. In fact, Alistair McGrath says these words, doubt is natural within the faith. And so if you're here and you've had doubts in your faith, it's okay. It's natural. It comes because of humans' weakness and frailty, he says. J.C. Ryle, an 18th century pastor, said, doubting does not prove that a man or a woman has no faith, but only that his faith or her faith is small. And even when our faith is small, he says, get the next words he says, the Lord is ready to help us. And so doubt is not necessarily a bad thing. Doubt could actually lead us to a deeper, more rock solid, more unshakable kind of a faith that we long for. And that's what we're going to see this morning. So if you have your Bibles, long intro, but if you have your Bibles, turn to Matthew chapter 11. And if you're watching online, I encourage you, like every week, to grab your Bible, open it up to Matthew chapter 11. The Mudas so gratefully read 1 to 19. I'm going to take it easy on you this morning and look just from 1 to 6, verses 1 to 6. And here's what we're going to learn this morning in verses 1 to 6. We're going to learn where doubt comes from. And then we're going to learn how we can defeat doubt when it hits our spiritual lives. So let's look. Where does doubt come from? And we see it right off the bat in Matthew chapter 11, 1 to 3. Let me read it to you. Verses 1, it says, after Jesus had finished instructing the 12 disciples, he went on from there to teach and to preach in the towns of Galilee. When John, that's John the Baptist, just so you know, when John, who was in prison, heard about the deeds of the Messiah, he went to his disciples and asked him, now notice where he doubted. Here comes the doubt. Are you the one who is to come? Or should we expect someone else? You got to notice this. John the Baptist, the forerunner to Jesus, the great prophet, the one who ushered Jesus onto the scene, the one who publicly claimed in front of many people and said these words that Jesus is the one who comes after me, whose straps of sandals I am unworthy to tie. John, the one who even baptized Jesus himself, is found doubting whether or not Jesus was the Messiah. Was he really who he says he is? So let me ask you, where does this come from? Where does this doubt come from? How in the world is John right here doubting? Well, we see in these 3 verses where that doubt comes from. And that doubt comes through 2 ways in John's life, which are many ways where doubt comes from in our life. The first way that we see doubt coming in John's life is that he was in a devastating circumstance. He faced a devastating circumstance. Did you notice verse 2 in this text? It says when John, and notice where he was. When John, who was in prison, you got to get this, John, the great prophet, the one who had a great following, and who was being used by God in such instrumental and wonderful and great ways, was now in prison. I mean, how could a man of this caliber, who had done so much for the Lord, be in prison? It doesn't really make any sense, and it didn't make any sense for John. But can I tell you how John wound up in prison? Well, if you were to go to Matthew chapter 14, you don't need to turn there, but if you were to look at Matthew chapter 14, it tells us how John ended up in prison. It tells us that John spoke out against the king, Herod Antipas. Well, the story goes like this. King Herod Antipas was married to a woman, and he didn't like that woman anymore. And so he divorced that woman and he got married. The problem is that he got married. The woman that he got married to was his niece. And so John had an opportunity to speak to this king, Herod Antipas. And when John spoke to this king, he said, that is kind of gross. That is really wrong and utterly unacceptable. Well, Herod Antipas, you can imagine if someone said that to the king, didn't like it. King Herod Antipas didn't like being judged, certainly by this guy from the wilderness. He didn't like to be confronted, and certainly in front of all these people. He didn't like to be challenged in his authority to be a challenge. And so you know what King Herod Antipas did? He threw John into jail. However, here's what you need to know, and I just learned this in just studying in this passage, and I found this fascinating. He didn't just throw John into any prison. There's a lot of prisons that he could have thrown him in. John was thrown into a prison called Machaerus. It was a jail that was constructed on top of, and I think we have a picture, was constructed on top of a rather large mountain. And this fortress that was turned into a jail was so difficult to get to that it was hard to even get there, let alone get any visitors there. And King Herod Antipas threw him into that jail on top of that mountain right there. But not only did he throw him into that jail, you know what he did? Historians tell us, at least they make a speculation, that Herod Antipas didn't like what he said so much that he threw him into the bowels, the deep recesses of that jail right there. And so, to say the obvious this morning, things were not looking very good for John the Baptist at this moment. The circumstances of his life were nonetheless devastating. And it was in this moment, in this devastation, where John began to question, is Jesus really the Messiah? Is Jesus really who he says he is? And he began to doubt, this wasn't a part of the plan. I mean, I was supposed to go before Jesus and proclaim. I didn't sign up to be thrown into the bowels of this prison. I was to point people to Jesus. How in the world can I point people to Jesus if I'm in the bowels of this isolated prison? I thought Jesus was the Messiah. I thought that he was going to come and save the world. Well, he's not saving me right now. I'm in the bowels of this place. I mean, I trusted him. Not only did I trust him, I proclaimed him, and I did what I was supposed to do. And now look at me, I'm here in this fortress, in this jail, all alone, barely able to get any visitors. You see, John had reached a devastating circumstance in this jail cell. And it was in the darkness of this jail cell where doubt didn't just come in. Doubt came crashing in. And church, can I just tell you, this can be true of us too. This can be true of us too. When devastating circumstances, when difficult circumstances, when hard circumstances come into our life, you know, we can be confronted with this nasty thing called doubt. A devastating circumstance in your life. It could be a devastating circumstance in your health. It could be a devastating circumstance with your kids. It could be a devastating circumstance with your finance. It could be a devastating flu called COVID. And when it hits, you begin to wonder, God, where are you? Why aren't you showing up? I thought that if I just followed you, if I loved you, if I went to church, if I did all those things I was supposed to do, I thought my life was going to go well, but look at my life. It's far from what I thought. And you see, doubt doesn't just creep in that moment. Doubt can come flooding in, and it can cause our life to come crashing down, as did John in this text. So where does doubt come from? We see in John's life, doubt came from when we're following God and when we're serving him, when we believe in him, and then wham, in comes a devastating circumstance. And then comes the question. In comes the doubting that confronts our souls. And so where does doubt come from? It comes from devastating circumstances, but that's not it. That's not all we see in this text. We see it come from another place in John's life, and we also see it come from another place in our life. It also comes when our expectations are broken, or when our expectations are unmet. Did you notice verse 2? Look at it again. It says, when John, who was in prison, there's the first one. But notice the next words. when John, who was in prison, heard about the deeds of the Messiah, you got to know what is being said here, what Matthew is saying here. Because right here we see John's expectations were completely broken. If you were to look at Matthew chapter 3, when John stepped on the scene, you would see that when John stepped on the scene, he began to tell people that the Messiah is coming. Repent and get ready. The Messiah, Jesus, the long foretold one of the Old Testament, was going to come. He is about to be here. And when he does, he will bring judgment. And when he does, he will rise up a new kingdom. And when he does, he'll bring liberty to the captives and he'll bring freedom to the prisoners. However, John's expectations were not met. They were broken. Because John is now in prison. Jesus hasn't brought a kingdom when he came and was established here on earth. He wasn't exercising judgment, really any sort of judgment on anyone. Rather, he came, the Bible tells us, eating and drinking with sinners. Not what John thought. He was gathering up a ragtag group of men who ranged from fishermen to tax collectors, hardly a militia or a group of individuals that you really would want to follow. And about his teaching. He was teaching not about judgment. He was teaching about forgiveness and about God's love. And beyond all of this, John would have seen, man, sin is still rampant and the religious leaders are still corrupt and the political leaders are still ruling from the thrones. This is not what I thought would happen when Jesus came, when the Messiah would be here. In many ways, John's expectations were completely and utterly broken. And in came the doubt. And church, in many ways, that can be like us. When our expectations are unmet, or when our expectations about God are broken, in comes that doubt. I mean, you thought honestly that you would have gotten into that school, but you never did. I mean, you prayed for it so often. In fact, you got people to pray for you that you could get into that school, get into that job, get into that marketplace, but it never came. You thought that you'd be dating someone by now, maybe engaged by now or married by now, but you're looking at your finger and there's nothing there. And you know the times that you've spent praying, and you know the times that you've been on your knees begging God to give you an understanding, and it's not showing up. Expectation may be broken. You thought you may have kids by now. You thought that your marriage would last forever. You thought that you'd be further along in life. You thought that you would have more money, you'd have a better job, kids who actually listened to you. You thought a lot of things, but none of those things are happening right now. And in comes the doubt. Is God really, does he care for me? Is he really there for me? And amongst all of this, does God really care? And in comes doubt. In fact, it doesn't come crawling in, it comes crashing in. It floods in and it attempts to wash away our faith. And the broken expectations are a breeding ground for doubt. And that's where John was in this prison. And that's why John, when he had an opportunity to speak to his disciples, he said, disciples, come here. I know you've been hanging out with me. I know I've been teaching you. And I know we've been doing all of these cool things. Can you do me a favor? Can you go and find Jesus wherever he is? Can you just ask him? Is he the Messiah? Because I'm struggling here. I'm in this prison all alone, and I'm second guessing. I don't know. I can't see that right now. Can you go and ask him? So the question, church, the question is this: where do we go? Where do we go when the floods of doubt come in? And how do we defeat this great giant called doubt? Well, do you know where we go? We look at how Jesus responds to John in this situation. We listen in, we eavesdrop on the conversation that Jesus has with John's disciples, that he gets to go and tell John, who is in prison. Look at verse 4. This is what Jesus says. And don't miss this. Jesus replied in verse 4, he said, go back and report to John what you hear and what you see. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, the good news is proclaimed to the poor. Blessed is anyone who does not stumble on account of me. There it is. Jesus' response to John's great giant called doubt. So how do you defeat doubt? Here's how. Here's how. It sounds so simple, and I know you've heard it before. But don't get lost in its simplicity, and don't just tune it out because, yeah, I've heard that before, Dave. Here's how we defeat doubt. We defeat doubt by planting God's truth in our hearts and leaning into God's promises. Now, I know what you're thinking. Trust me, I've wrestled through this all week. You're thinking, come on, Dave. That's a good Christian answer. Trust in the Bible and everything will go away. But let me tell you, church, let me tell you. God's word is truth in our life. His promises are what we can anchor ourselves into when those doubts come into our life. Notice what Jesus said again. Let me read it to you. Jesus turns to John's disciples and he says, boys, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go back to John because he can't see it and he may have limited hearing in hearing about it. I want you to go back and I want you to report to John what you hear and what you see. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, the good news are proclaimed to the poor. Do you know what Jesus is doing here? You got to get this. You got to know what Jesus is doing here. Jesus is pointing John back to the Old Testament. He is reminding John about what was foretold about the coming Messiah. He was encouraging John, John, I know you're in prison, but I want you to cling to and hold on to God's word. I want you to use it to comfort your soul in amidst the doubt. You notice what John said first. He said, or Jesus said first, he said, hey, John, I want you to remember Isaiah chapter 29, verses 18 and 19. When he declared as a prophet who the Messiah, how we would be able to recognize who the Messiah was. Do you remember what Isaiah said in the Old Testament? When he said, in that day, when the Messiah would come, in that day, the deaf would hear the words of the scroll. And out of gloom and darkness, the eyes of the blind will see. Once more, the humble will rejoice in the Lord. The needy will rejoice in the Holy One of Israel. John, let me ask you, is that happening right now? Is that happening not in the background, but is that happening right now in my life? Is the deaf hearing? Is the blind seeing? Are the needy rejoicing? Are they, John? Hey, John, do you also remember Isaiah 35, verses 5 and 6? When Isaiah gives another picture of what this Messiah would look like and do when he came, when he said in verse 5, then the eyes of the blind will be open, and the ears of the deaf would be unstopped. Then the lame will leap like deer, and the mute tongue will shout for joy. John, the eyes of the blind are being opened. The ears of the deaf are being unstopped. And let me tell you, John, the lame are leaping like deer, and the mute are shouting for joy and worshiping. They're doing it right now. Hey, John, you remember in Isaiah chapter 26, verse 9, when it says, "But your dead will live, their bodies will rise. You will dwell in the dust, wake up. You who dwell in the dust, wake up and shout for joy." John, are the dead rising? Have I raised someone from the dead? Are the spiritually dead coming to life and worshiping? Are the scales of their eyes being lifted and we're seeing dead people worship? John, buddy, it's happening right now. John, do you remember Isaiah 61, verse 1, where Isaiah says, "In that time when the Messiah comes, the Spirit of the sovereign Lord is on me. Because the Lord has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners." John, you were there. You remember when you baptized me? Do you remember what happened right after you baptized me? Do you remember that the Spirit of the sovereign Lord descended from heaven and came upon me? And when he came upon me, I preached good news to the poor. And the brokenhearted were liberated, and those who were in bondage were released, and those living in darkness were healed. Do you remember that, John? Hold on to it. Cling on to it. John, I am the Messiah. I'm the one that the Old Testament has foretold about and talked about. You do not need to doubt, John. All you need to do is cling on to and press into and trust what the Bible had said and notice what is happening. Is it coming true today? Because if you do that, that will quench the doubt inside of you. And so what Jesus is doing here, is that when he encountered the doubts of John, he says, "John, don't you forget. Don't you forget. Don't you forget those words of old." And what he was doing is he was pointing him back to the Bible. So the question, why the Bible? You want to know why the Bible? Because the Bible, as Psalm 119:05 says, is a lamp unto your feet and a light unto your path. John, remember God's word, because it will guide you in this season of doubt. Remember God's word. And John, remember the Bible, because it is perfect. The Lord's word is flawless. It shields all those who take refuge in him. Psalm 18:30. John, you could take refuge in the truth of God's word. You can anchor yourself there. You can, press into God's word. Why? Because it is perfect, and you've seen that. God's word is flawless, and you've seen that, John. It is coming to life right before your very eyes, so you could take refuge in God's word. John, I know that you're in a devastating circumstance, and I know that your expectations have been broken. But John, in this turbulent time of doubt, I want to encourage you, buddy, and anchor yourself upon the truth of the Bible and cling on to its promises, because when you do that, you will find answers that will help you and encourage you when you face this giant called doubt. And the same is with you, church. It's not just for John. When doubt comes knocking on your door, and it will, when doubt comes knocking on your door, one of the things that we should do, and one of the things we should remind ourselves when it comes, is we need to press into God's word. We need to remember. So let me ask you, what has God promised you? If Jesus is saying one of the things we ought to do when doubt comes, we need to press into the promises of God. We need to trust in God's word. What has God promised you? What can you anchor yourself into when you face life's doubts? Can I give you just 4? You feel alone, and in that loneliness, doubt may come in. Feeling discouraged. Because in that moment, that doubt can come in. Is doubt staring you in your eye? Well, you know where you cling on to, you press into? Isaiah chapter 41, when it says, do not fear if you feel alone. Do not fear if you're discouraged. Do not fear if you're wrestling with the battle of doubt, for I, the Lord Almighty, am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am the Lord your God. I will strengthen you, and I will help you, and I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. You feel scared? Certainly in our world today, a lot of people do feel scared. You're facing uncertainty in your life, uncertainty in our culture, uncertainty in our world, uncertainty maybe even in your marriage. Where do you go? Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 8 says these words, the Lord himself goes before you in your uncertainty. The Lord, your God, goes before you when you are scared and you do not know what to do, and he will be with you. He will never leave you. He will never forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. Feel tired? Feel tired? Feel the weight of life's pressures on your shoulders? Do you feel like, I don't know what to do? I don't know what to do in my workplace. I don't know what to do with my kids. I don't know what decisions I should make. I don't know what to do. You feel that? Where do you go? You go to Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 and 29, where Jesus says, come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest when you're tired. You'll find rest when you're uncertain. You'll find rest when you're feeling life's pressures. You feel powerless? You feel powerless. Certainly COVID can make us feel powerless. You feel unsure what you should be doing, the decisions that you should be making in amongst COVID. Does doubt have a stranglehold on you in this circumstance? Where do you go? 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 9 and 10 says this, my grace, Jesus, my grace is sufficient for you. You don't have to carry it. Even though you may feel powerless, my grace is sufficient, is all you need, is sufficient for you. For my power is made perfect in your weakness. If you feel powerless, it's great, because I will be your power for you. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly in my weakness when I'm uncertain, where I don't know what to do, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in my weakness, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. Why? Because for when I am weak, he is strong. I'm strong because of what Christ can do in me. Church, I've just given you 4 promises. Did you know that there are over 365 promises that God gives you in the Bible? That's one for every single day. Imagine if you knew each one of them. Imagine if you could remember each one of them when that doubt comes creeping into your life. Imagine the courage that it could give you, the strength that it could give you, the power that it could give you if you could just anchor yourself, press into God's word when that giant called doubt comes crashing in. Church, what do we do when we face spiritual doubts? What do we do when it comes into our life? We anchor ourselves in God's word. We plant ourselves there. We bring it out as a weapon against our doubt. You see, here's the thing. The Bible isn't just a book to be looked at here at church. The Bible isn't just a historical document recounting past events. The Bible isn't just something that you pull out when you need it and then you put it back when life is good. Church, you got to know this. The Bible is your weapon. It is your battle cry. It is your tool to be able to wage war when doubt comes crashing into it. So let me ask you, do you believe the Bible? Do you believe the words that are found in the Bible? Do you believe that God, all of that God has promised you? Do you know them? And I don't mean, do you just know them? Do you know them inside your heart? Do you believe them? How often are you in and meditating and you're reading God's word? How often does it fill your mind when those storms of doubt come raging in? How do we wage war on the doubt that comes in our spiritual life when they come flooding in? We don't run. We don't cower. We don't allow anxieties, questions to flood our mind. Rather, what we ought to do, and what Jesus was saying in this conversation is, John, remember God's word. And plant yourself there. Trust yourself in what you hear and in what you see. Now, church, I know I'm almost done, but look at verse 6. You got to look at verse 6. It's another verse that you need to circle in your Bible. It's another verse that maybe you need to put up on your mirror so you can stare at it every single day that you're brushing your teeth or combing your hair or do whatever you do when you look in the mirror. But Jesus said these words to John. He said, John, buddy, I know you're in prison. I know you're in a dark place, and I know that you're battling spiritually. But John, buddy, blessed is anyone, and that's us as well, anyone who does not stumble or waver on the account of me. John, in those moments of doubt, in those moments of questioning, in those moments where you are wrestling in your faith, John, don't you stumble. Don't you fall away. Don't you lose your faith. Don't you give up. Don't you walk away. Don't you allow the difficult circumstances of your life or the unmet expectations to railroad you and land you in a devastating blow against your faith. Don't you let that happen, John. Why? Because John, buddy, if you could just hold on, if you could just press in, if you could just remain faithful, you will be blessed. You got to know that word blessed is such an incredible word. It means, here's what it means. This is what this word means. You got to get this. This word means a deep and supernatural joy and happiness and contentness. It means that if you could just hold on, if you could just hang in there, if you could just anchor yourself in the truth and the promises of the Bible, and if it could fill your thoughts, it will bring you, this is what it says, inexpressible joy in amongst your doubt. It could bring you inexpressible happiness in your doubt. It could bring you inexpressible contentness. God will honor you if you just hold on in this moment. So church, when spiritual doubts come either creeping into our life or flooding into our life, what Jesus says in this conversation, one of the things we ought to do is press into God's word. Remember God's promises that he's given you and wage war on this thing called doubt. Why? Because if you do, church, if you do in this season of COVID, in this season of unknown, if you could just do that, God's promises and what he promises you is that you would be filled with inexpressible joy, you will be filled with inexpressible happiness, and you'll be filled with inexpressible contentness inside of you. So let me ask you, how are you doing in dealing with life's doubts? Where are you going when they hit your life? And where are you going to turn? There's two options. Really, there's two options. It could send you down to the depths of a prison into a holding cell and lock you there. Or you can allow Jesus' words in this conversation to pull you up and where you can begin to worship, perhaps like you've never worshiped before. Which one are you going to choose? That's this conversation that Jesus had with John the Baptist. What are you going to do? How are you going to handle life's doubts? And so, here's what we're going to do, like we've done every Sunday. I'm going to pray. We're going to watch another worship song on screen. I want to give you the opportunity, however the Lord leads you, however you want to express, God, I'm trusting you. Can't see tomorrow. I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know what is going to happen. I'm trusting you. We're going to sing a song that's called Waymaker. You may be familiar with it. But may this song, along with God's promises, be your battle cry if you're struggling this morning. However you choose to worship, it's okay. But would you worship knowing that God is with you and his promises can sustain you? Father, as we go and just watch this song and begin to worship you, Father, I pray if there's anyone in this room that may be struggling in life's doubts, life struggles, wondering where are you, what are you doing, having a tough time seeing you in it. God, I pray that we would be able to learn this lesson from this conversation, that if we could just press into your word, if we could just get to know it, if we could use it as a weapon for us, that you will bless us. You'll give us inexpressible joy. You'll give us inexpressible contentness in our life. So God, I pray that by your Spirit, as we watch this worship song, as we worship through this worship song, by your Spirit, would you move in us? And I pray these things in Christ's name. Amen.
You are here, you're moving in our midst. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, you're working in this place. I worship you, I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. You are here, you're touching every heart. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, you're healing every heart. I worship you, yeah, I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper,
Church, do you believe it? Do you believe that Jesus, that God is a way maker, that he could do what maybe you think right now he can't do? Do you believe that blessed is the one who does not fall away on account of me, that if you could just press in, that you could just believe, you could just hold in there, hang on, that God will fill you up and bless you with inexpressible joy, inexpressible contentness. Church, can I just tell you, I know we're going over, but I just got to tell you this. We've seen that. We've seen that in Dan Wadsworth's life. Dan, I know you're watching. We've seen that in your life, buddy. That he was facing cancer. He was facing surgery, still needing to. And yet he's still pressing in. He's still believing. Wayne, right here, this past Wednesday, just got baptized. Been waiting since COVID started to be baptized. You're going to see that baptism. You're going to see that baptism in 2 weeks. We're going to show it on the screen. He is a testimony of being able to hold on and press into even through the doubts of life. Church, there's countless others. We're going to have a baptism every single Sunday in the month of September, and you're going to hear stories of people who have pressed in and are choosing to believe in the promises despite through life's doubts that can come creeping into our lives. It's exciting. We got a new series starting next week. I hope you're excited about it. It's called Something More. Ever feel like we're in a drought? Ever feel like we're right now in a season of a desert? You long for something more? You long for something, God to do something in your life, in your marriage, in your workplace, in your street, in your neighborhood. You long for something more. Or we're going to spend 4 weeks talking about how we can see God do something more in each one of those situations. So I encourage you to come back. For those watching online, thank you so much for tuning in with us online. We'll be back here at 10 a.m. And for those of you inside of the church here, the building, thank you so much for being here. We will be back again, ready to worship once more next week. God bless you. We'll see you next week.